Just jump in and take it from the top. All right, here we go. Salute to Knicks Nation on this Monday evening. Another Knicks Fan TV and Bleacher Report simulcast. Who will the Knicks be drafting in the 2025 NBA Draft? We're going to do our NBA Draft preview with our guy, Corey Taluba, returning to the show of the No Ceilings podcast. They cover the NBA Draft all year round. You got to make sure that you guys are tapping in with the No Ceilings crew. Those are our guys, man. So if you have questions for Corey tonight, hit us up on the KFTV Discord. Salute to everybody in the chat once again. Hit the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to the channel. The NBA season is over, but that doesn't stop here on Knicks Fan TV, man. We are now in off-season mode, and let's get into it. My guy, Corey,
my man.
How you feeling, bro?
Man, I'm excited to be back here. Been a minute.
Yeah.
Been a minute, but for good reason, right? You know, no longer the Knicks following the draft all year round. Happy for all my fellow New Yorkers. But still interesting stuff going on in the offseason for you guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I'm excited to be back on the platform. Shout out to Knicks Nation. Feels good to be in the chair here.
Man, when we first started doing these, the first few years, we're now in year 8. We've celebrated our 8th year anniversary, so now we're kicking off year 9 at KFTV. Those first few years, man, we would be doing these draft shows very early in May, like it's April, May, and we'd be going weeks and weeks combing through who is going to be able to help this Knicks team. But as you said, man, they had a good year. Unfortunately, ended rough, but hey, they do have the 50th pick in the draft, so let's see where they land there if they do choose to make the pick. Overall, your thoughts on this crop? That's usually the first question I ask you. You guys do the homework at No Ceilings all year long. What do you think about this group this year, this draft class?
I think it's strong. A lot of people feel like after the first 2 picks, it drops off a little bit, and I think that's probably correct. But I still think that the draft is loaded with talent from a depth perspective. I think there are guys that have star upside littered throughout the draft. It's just about identifying, finding them, putting them in a good system, and giving them opportunities, right? We look at the 2 best players in the NBA Finals, both drafted outside of the top 10. Sure. So, there's always talent to be found, to be had. And I don't think this draft is any different. Of course, you got the obvious guys in Cooper and Dillon, and depending on how you feel about Ace Bailey and Trey Johnson and Derek Queen and such. But even into the second round, there's a lot of value to be had. And I think the playoffs and the finals, especially since it just ended and the draft is in a couple of days, it's going to be fresh on a lot of front offices' minds. And I think maybe that's where you're going to find these guys on the outskirts who might be 8th men, 7th men, but are playing valuable minutes in the playoffs. I think that's where you're going to find them. So there's definitely talent to be had.
Where do you think every year we feel like there's one position over another that has the most depth? What do you think it is this year?
Man, that's a good question. It's hard to say. It's a weird class, I think there's good guard depth. There's a lot of good wing depth, and there's some good bit. I think every position, no matter what you need, you're going to be able to find a good player. I think, there's not necessarily that Wemby Chet level big man. So maybe you say it lacks depth there, but Malawak is a really interesting guy. You have guys like Queen and Colin Murray-Boyles who are a little unorthodox. Jean Béranger from France is a name who's heating up. And I think could be a lottery pick who a lot of people maybe haven't heard of necessarily, but 7 foot in shoes, 7'4.5" wingspan, lob threat, defensive guy. But then, you got a ton of fun guards even after Dylan Harper. You got Jeremiah Fears, you got Trey Johnson, you got Yegor Demon, Kasparis Yakachonis, who, are everyone's split on. then you got guys like Carter Bryant and Noah Senge and Cedric Coward, who's a name who's been on fire lately from the wing crop. So again, like there is just talent everywhere, no matter what the position. It's just, maybe there's not Wemby. Well, maybe there's not Chet. There's not a unicorn. And, I think if you're looking in the NBA Finals, you're looking at stretch bigs. That's something that every team probably wants, even if, Miles Turner is inconsistent, game to game. You still want a guy like that out there. But then again, Mitchell Robinson was, super crucial for the Knicks in the playoffs as a guy who can't shoot. And that's where you see a guy like a Malawach or a Baron J or depending on how you feel about an Asa Newell or guys like that too. So it's all going to come down to roster construction, but there's depth to be had. There's players to be found. Just got to go get them and identify them.
Got to go get them. So now, you mentioned the previous unicorns in Wemby. What about Cooper Flagg, man? What do you think he stands as the number one pick? He's going to be going to Dallas. What do you think about Cooper Flagg and his NBA prospects?
Yeah, he's a superstar. Straight up, no questions asked. Don't overthink it. Don't try to be controversial and be like, I don't think he's that good. Like, he's 6'8", 6'9", 7-foot wingspan, averaged almost 19 points a game this year. This is a kid who reclassified. He should be preparing for his prom right now. Like, he's not supposed to even be in college. He's high school senior age, graduated early. He was the most complete player in college basketball, just straight up. And made major leaps as a shooter as the year went on, really came out of the gate struggling. Looked like he tweaked his mechanics a little bit from high school. But then he lived up to the billing. He's an incredible passer. He doesn't have the showmanship, the creativity of a Luka. So I don't think that, Mavericks fans should get excited that all of a sudden, he's going to be doing crazy stuff, but he makes the right reads, even if they don't look as flashy. And then he's going to defend 1 through 4 pretty seamlessly. And then, he'll battle, he'll fight if he gets switched on to a 5. So, all the hype I think is warranted with him. I really do. He's competitive as any prospect you're going to find. He's got that motor that he doesn't take plays off, and he's really grown a lot. The first time I saw him when he was in 10th grade, I was like, this dude, like really? Like he's the dude who's getting all this. I thought he was supposed to be taller. I thought he was supposed to be more, and I was just like, he's all right, and then seeing him the next year, against Lou High and just locking up VJ Edgecombe in high school, like as this explosive, quick guard couldn't get an inch on him. They played that game at Hofstra, probably the biggest high school basketball game on Long Island in I don't even know since Jason Frazier in Amityville, and I was like, all right. And then I saw him at Hoop Summit, and then what he did this year, the trajectory he's on, he's just going to keep getting better and better. The kid. He's legit. He's the goods.
Cooper Flagg. Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see how he fares with Dallas. Kyrie's going to be slow moving in terms of the ACL injury, and then we see how he pairs with AD. But I like the tools, man. Especially when he got into the tournament, just seemed like the maturity was off the scales. As you said, a kid who should be going to his high school prom this year, but you could see it when those guys are like at that NBA level, at the college level, man. So
and he's not perfect,
right?
He's got stuff he's got to work on. His handle it could get a little shaky at times. Like it's not as creative as you want it to be. He missed some clutch shots, but he's willing to take them. He's willing to to work and get better. So I think that handle's going to ultimately get better.
Yeah.
And but again, you can't sneeze at 17 years old, starting the season and averaging almost 20 points per game on Duke. You can't. There's nothing to sneeze at.
That's right. Is there a gap between him and Harper? Like, has he earned that number one pick, or does Harper make a case as well?
I love Dylan. Again, another local guy. I'm sure, a lot of Knicks fans who are watching this are going to be familiar with his game. But I tweeted out in the summer that I thought he was a Cade Cunningham level prospect. And I personally, even with Rutgers struggling this year, I thought he did his part. And he dealt with adversity. He got injured, he got sick. And that Rutgers roster, apologies to any alumni watching this, not great. Not great. He had a lot of heavy lifting to do there, but As good as he is, I think Hooper's in his own tier. I think he'd be a number one pick in a lot of drafts. He's going to be around 6'6" in shoes. He's got a long wingspan. He's strong, underrated first step, really elusive, incredible in tight spaces. I think he's a better shooter than he gets credit for. Doesn't really have an in-between game. He gets comped to bigger Jalen Brunson a lot, but the JB is just in that paint area, in that in-between area. Once he gets two, he's pump faking, spinning, and that in-between game is off the charts for him. Dylan's got a lot of work to do in that respect, but he's a tough shot maker. He's a really good passer. He's competitive defensively, and I don't think San Antonio should overthink it. I know that fit is really weird.
That's what I was thinking, because they have Fox there. You got Castle. I mean, is it just, hey, take this guy, he's the best player of the group, and then we figure it out? Maybe you got to move some guys. Maybe we go after Giannis, figure it out later.
Yeah, you know what? Giannis is the one guy that I would have to have a serious conversation with, because, one, we see the NBA is wide open. I think Wemby's ready. And the fact of the matter is, as young as he is, the history of guys that tall holding up physically is just not very good. Like that is, for me, something to worry about. And I don't think they should rush the process.
Right.
I don't think they should go make a silly move, but Giannis is still one of the best players in the world. And if you can get a Giannis to pair with Wemby with that team, they could make a run next year, the year after. Maybe the window's a little shorter, but it's a real window. So he's the only guy that I would go, all right, I think we got to have a real meeting about this. But other than that, I don't know who is even on the market that you'd have a conversation about. I think you just take it, you figure it out later. You can move off Fox, you could build with the young guys, put pieces around them, and do it organically.
Now, the Ace Bailey thing has kind of taken over the entire draft, over the Flagg stuff, over Harper. He's not working out with teams. He doesn't want to, he doesn't want to meet with the Sixers. He doesn't want to work out with this team, but yet they're saying that he wants to stay on the East Coast. Let's talk about that first, the whole drama about that. What do you think about the whole Ace Bailey drama right now?
I mean, on one hand, I don't think you can brush it off. But on the other hand, I think it's being a little bit overblown. I mean, we were on the draft night stream together when Anthony Edwards was talking about being a football player and a rapper and, not really looking like he cared about basketball. And now he's one of the best assets in the league, right? So these kids are young, they're immature. And this is a kid who chose representation with Sharif Cooper's dad.
Sharif Cooper, right.
Yeah, he doesn't have a large client list. And he grew up in Georgia, and he trusts this guy. We'll see if the master plan works out. But as a 18-year-old kid, I don't know how much fault I'm putting on him in trusting somebody that he, is familiar with, whose son has played in the league. Maybe, hasn't had the career that, I'm sure he had dreamed of and maybe had been hyped up to have, but I'm not going to fault him, even if I think that the process has been really bad and he probably should have chosen maybe different representation. But again, he's 18. But from everything I've seen him in practices, both at Rutgers, at Hoop Summit. I've seen infectious energy. Everybody loves him. Loudest guy in the gym, always communicating, always talking, positive energy, hard worker. I coached a kid who's been a team manager at Rutgers the last 4 years, loves Ace. Obviously he's like 17, 18-year-old kid. He's going to be immature at times, but like when his body fills out, but like loved being around him. Guys loved him. So at the end of the day, man, like we had these conversations about LaMelo. We had them about Shaedon Sharpe. Talent is talent. I don't think this is a free fall in the likes of Cam Whitmore. That was more medical based. If he's trying to get himself somewhere, maybe it works out. He gets to Washington, he gets to Brooklyn, whatever he's thinking. Yeah. And we look at it and it works out and everybody's happy. But as for how it plays out, it's only time will tell. Daryl Morey, he might be like, look, we sent guys to see him at Rutgers. We've been in the gym with him USA events and this and that. Like, we already know enough. We don't need to see him work out in our building.
Yeah, true. True.
Right. Like, we're just going to take him. Like, we'll find out in a couple of days, ultimately, how much this representation situation ultimately affects him.
And you've had picks in the past that have been picked up by teams that haven't worked out with them, right? So, I mean, maybe the talent.
The Phoenix Suns at 10, how many guys have they worked out in that range, right?
That's right. That's right.
They got 2 days to figure this stuff out. It's a little different, but it's not all that different.
Yeah. Nets right now with the number 8 pick. Could it be a Brooklyn play? I mean, I still think Philly at 3. You get Maxey there. You figure does he the heir apparent to Paul George ultimately playing his way out of there? Wouldn't be a bad play.
And Paul George said that he's spoken glowingly about Ace. So it seems like he'd be a guy who'd be willing to mentor him, show him the way. Whether, I know Paul George is on the downside of his career, and a lot of people are clowning him for focusing more on the podcast, but we forget how good this guy was in his prime, right? So, there's worse guys you can learn from, at that position. And Ace is super talented, man. For all his flaws, Rutgers was significantly better with him on the floor. Just undeniably, by the numbers, by the video, he still scored 17 points per game. He could play on the ball. He could play off of it. He's probably going to be more of a off-ball guy unless his handle really takes some steps. But he plays defense. He's young. He's got some growing to do. A lot of these guys do. At the end of the day, you got to swing for talent.
That's right.
There's other parts of the draft. There's free agency. There's trades. You can get role players, but it's hard to get high upside talent that at 6'9". It's just hard.
True indeed. Once again, our guy Corey Taluba is back. We are talking about the NBA Draft 2025 coming up this Wednesday. We will have our live draft show this Wednesday as well here on KnicksFanTV, so make sure you tap into that. If you guys want to call up and talk to Corey about any type of picks, any sleepers in the second round, we're going to get to that in just a moment, but you can call us up on the KFTV Discord. Salute to everybody watching on the Facebook side, Bleacher Report, YouTube, as usual. Salute to my franchise channel members. And speaking of which, our guy Daniel Beausejour says, he says Coop, meaning Sharif Cooper's pops, got a notorious reputation down here. Trust, it's not great. I know firsthand. Have you heard anything, bro? Like, when you're working in those circles, is this a case where teams are like, I don't want to work with this agent? It's a little trouble.
I haven't heard. He doesn't have a ton of clients, right?
Yeah,
so he's not a guy who's in the mix year in and year out. I don't know anything personally. I'm not going to throw dirt on his name because I haven't heard anything. I know that there are people in the league who are not happy with the way that he is approaching this. Not even for specifically just Ace, but how he's kind of throwing a wrench in the rest of the draft. So, other agents are kind of like, what are we doing here? This could affect my guy.
Yeah.
But I trust the caller if he knows, and it's one of those if you know situations. So, but I don't have any insight into that.
I hear that. Daniel says they think they're trying to steer him towards the Wizards at number 6, which would be kind of interesting. Not sure what the Wizards' appeal is there, but hey, if they can resurrect their dead franchise, that would be nice. Maybe it's a little. Who's the second round pick for France? Alex Sarr. Maybe it's Sarr and Bailey as the ticket. Hey, never know. I do like Bob Carrington and those guys, and they got Koulibaly, so they got some young scrappers there. So we'll see what happens there. But on to the orange and blue, the New York Knicks, man. Right now, they got the 50th pick in the draft. Not too sexy, man, but when you think about guys in that caliber, who do you like for the Knicks, man?
First name that comes to mind is Kobe Bryant.
Okay.
Played at Kentucky this year. Played at Dayton in the previous years.
Yeah.
And I mention him just because he's the best shooter in the draft. Maybe you can make an argument for some other guys, but there's a guy who over the last 2 years on 400 plus attempts shot 47.5% from three. Career almost 44% over his entire college career. 6'7" in shoes. Strong guy. I got a chance to break down film with him, watch him work out in LA.
Okay.
Great kid, New Yorker. Very
Yes.
much, loves that side of himself, being from New York. I think people look at him like, oh, he's a shooter and that's all he is. But like, he's got wiggle, like he's got like real New York handles. He can pass a little bit. He played a role where he only got to flash that a little bit. But when he brought it out, like, he could boogie. So I think that, anytime you get a 6'7" shooter, like, these guys are going to stick in the league, and we're talking pick 50. Mm-hmm. The chances you get an NBA player at pick 50 are, it's not very high, right?
Flip of a coin.
Regardless, there's a lot. You got to identify the guy. There's a chance that you can definitely get one, but you got to find him. So I love Kobe. Played in a lot of college games, experienced, and I just think 44% over your career, 700 plus attempts. That's going to be a long time pro at 6'7".
So let me ask you. I asked the same question of Kevin O'Connor, man. Like, a guy like that, why is he prospected so low?
You're going to find him as mostly a second round guy, right? Like, you might find him on one mock in the early 30s. You might find him closer to the Knicks pick in other mocks. He's older, right? He played in college for 5 years. He did have a pretty serious injury where he had to get rods in his legs in Dayton.
Okay.
So, I think that is part of it. He's never necessarily been the featured guy on his team. He played with Deron Holmes at Dayton. Kentucky this year, he wasn't even necessarily the guy. They didn't really have a guy at Kentucky this year. It was much more of a everybody eats kind of system. So he never really got to show like, oh, let me just go and create consistently, play with the ball in my hands. So I think he was hidden a little bit, and I think that's why there's a little bit of value there. But I think it was mostly the age and the injury, which he told me, like, it took a while for him to feel confident in his legs. That's the kind of thing where you really got to build back up. But I thought he had an incredible last couple of years. And, I think that if NIL didn't exist, I mean, he probably comes out last year where he shot just under 50% from three last year. So, he's just, the kid's got a strap, like a straight up strap.
Yeah.
And personally on my board, I got him at like 25. Like, I just think that a guy who's 6'7", who shoots like that and can pass, like, really good assist to turnover ratio, like, isn't gonna, turn into a pumpkin when he needs to create his own shot. Like, he's just gonna be an NBA player. So I think that's worth taking in the first round. So it wouldn't surprise me if he does go a little bit earlier, but there are some concerns that I can see too. So but I think he would be great in New York, and I think he would bask at the opportunity to play here.
Sure. And look, where the Knicks are right now, they need a guy who's plug and play, who's mature, who's ready to go right now, and they need some shooting. So, let's see where he ends up. I have a hard time seeing if they even make a pick this year, if they trade up, just knowing that, they're going to be so much by the book salary-wise. It's going to be hard to see them kind of moving up unless they really like somebody who's on their board in the war room. But let's see. Kobe Bryant, could the local product be headed to the orange and blue? How about Eric Dixon?
Yeah, Eric's a guy, when you ask me like some guys, he's a guy I mentioned just because I know that one, Big East guy, Knicks are going to be familiar with him. He's been playing at the Garden for a number of years. But I also know the Knicks have been, really trying to get him in their building for workouts. They put a lot of effort to get him in to where, they asked a couple of times and scheduling conflicts and, they kept persisting. Hey, let's get a workout in. So I know that there's at least a little bit of interest in seeing what's going on there, but he's 6'8". He led the nation in scoring in college basketball, 23.3 points per game, shot over 40% from three on 7 attempts a game this year. Lefty. I just watched film with him. He had mentioned,
I'm pulling it up right now.
The guys he mentioned that he kind of admires, because he's a Philly kid, is the Morris twins, Zach Randolph. So he feels like he brings that toughness to a team. You also mentioned Tim Duncan, and that's where you see he's very soft-spoken. And mature, not flashy, not going to be screaming necessarily, right? Just goes about his business. So there's also the Villanova connection. I didn't say him necessarily because of that, but he trains with McCall in the offseason at
Okay.
a gym in New Jersey. He knows all the Nova Knicks. As they come back to Villanova, so there's some familiarity. But 6'8", strong, 260, something like that. Lefty who can shoot from three, take the ball, take guys off the bounce. I think he'd operate much more as a play finisher than a creator. He's not going to do a lot of that little get the ball at the elbow, jab, shoot, or take coming in as a rookie. But I think you play a simplistic game, tough kid, and just plug and play. And again, there's some interest there, behind the scenes.
How would he in the film? Did you talk about his defense? How would he rate his defensive ability?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get to break down the defense, but he definitely, I think, was known more as that hustle garbage guy, energy defense 3-and-D kind of guy before he made his way up the ladder earlier in his career playing for Jay Wright. That was more his role. And I think that if you learn anything from these playoffs, you got to have guys who are strong and physical and can withstand that. And he embraces it, and he understands that that's going to be his role. That's what he needs to do. I think that's why he mentioned the Morris twins when we talked about him. I think I edited that out of the video, but left it in the podcast form. But so he knows that defensively he's going to have to give more on that end than he was able to do shouldering the offense this year. But in the cool thing about him is you can go watch him be the leading scorer, and you can see him kind of grow and the roles that he's played, that malleability of just patiently developing his game. And he showed that in the years where he wasn't shouldering the load.
Another area of need for the New York Knicks. Could it be Eric Dixon? What do you guys think in the chat? Thumbs up, thumbs down at the prospect of a guy like an Eric Dixon, man. Villanova product, senior, 24 years old, 6'8", 260, averaged 24 points per game, 5 rebounds for Nova last year. Could be a guy in the Knicks' wheelhouse. Okay, let's talk about Elijah Martin. What do you think about him?
Man, I love this kid's game. Reminds me a lot of Deuce, but bigger.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he's a little bigger. Got a chance to watch him work out, talk to him in LA, great kid, hard worker, and he's a winner, man. He helped FAU get to the Final Four a couple of years ago, won a national title with Florida this year. He does the little things. Again, and I'm watching the Thunder, and you're watching Alex Caruso and Casey Wallace and Lou Dort and the pressure that they're able to apply at the point of attack and the length and the disruption. And I look at a kid like that and I'm like, I could see him playing on this team, in that role, and then going and knocking down shots at the other end. He had one of the highlight dunks, of the tournament this year. So he's super athletic, super strong, super physical, good shooter, and just one of these kids who underdog, small school, and then eventually transfers up, wins a national title. So I think he's being undervalued. Right now he's in that Knicks range as far as the consensus board that I put together, where I take a bunch of mainstream boards and try to average them out to remove, some biases. So he's right in that Knicks range. I think that's undervaluing him. But if he's there, that'd be really exciting, especially because, to keep it more Knicks specific, I think as far as making a roster move and this is with ignoring the money, I think Deuce is one of their trade chips that they kind of need to use to maybe find a guy who can play alongside Jalen Brunson, because I don't know how many minutes you can play Deuce and Jalen Brunson in high leverage games together. You look at the way the league is trending, not a lot of room for small guys, on the court. So if you can kind of get this guy to come in and play a similar role to Deuce, he's a little bit bigger, not much, and maybe move Deuce for somebody who's a little bigger, if it's a little bit more seamless with the rest of the roster, and maybe could play alongside Brunson. I think maybe that's a direction the Knicks might need to go. And I love Deuce, which is why I like Elijah Martin. But it could be some of my thinking there.
Elijah Martin, 6'3", senior out of Florida, 17 points per game, 5.3 rebounds per game last year for the national champions. What do you guys think in the chat, man? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Elijah Martin, what do you guys think about his prospects? Alan Joe in the chat says he reminds me of Bruce Brown a little. Is there a little Bruce Brown comparison there?
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Where is his teammate Walter Clayton Jr. going? I think me and you had talked about this on Twitter. I need him in a Knick uniform. That's who I'm going for right now. He's a bucket. He should be a lottery pick, in my opinion. Where do you think Walter Clayton Jr. is going right now?
I would say he doesn't make it past Brooklyn. Obviously not in the
20s.
Yeah.
Probably.
They got they have I think they have the 19th pick, and then they got a couple in the 20s.
Yes. They have 26, 27, and 19.
Yeah. Yeah. So but it wouldn't shock me if he does go earlier. I agree with you. I think he's going to be one of the 14 best players out of this draft. A little as a St. John's fan, was a little sad he didn't follow Patino to St. John's from Iona. But, this is a kid we've been tracking for years. And this year, man, he was a problem. And if we're talking small guards, and obviously Knicks fans know better than most because Jalen Brunson is not only a small guard that's defied the odds, but one of the best players in the league, best playoff performers in the league. Walter Clayton is a guy who, as a small guard, is like, he's strong, he's athletic, he's stocky, right? He's not going to get bumped off his spots, when the wind blows, and he can shoot that thing. Like, whether he's catch and shoot, creating his own shot, like, there's a lot of Peyton Pritchard parallels, I think, for Walter Clayton. I think if you gave Peyton Pritchard his own team, he's a guy who, would get busy. So I think that Walter Clayton is a guy who's he'd be able to come in and, like, give some minutes early on as a rookie, as rookies do, go through his rookie struggles. And then by the end of his rookie deal, I think there'd be a lot of value there given, how mature his game already is.
Yeah, very interesting, man. I like that kid a lot. Trent Totten in our chat says, how do you feel about Jamir Watkins? Yeah,
Jamir Watkins is interesting just because, long wings or who could shoot threes or, and play defense are going to be interesting, right? But he's a little bit older, hasn't really taken the jump at, when he transferred to Florida State. Maybe points per game wise, average wise, he took a jump, but it never felt like, all right, this is something that would translate to the next level. But when you scale him back down to a role player, I think he's interesting. If he was there for the Knicks, he's a name I was considering sending to you for sure. I think he might be maybe a little out of this range. I think he might go a little bit earlier. I don't think he's going to be a first rounder, but I think he's probably one of these guys that's going to be a little bit earlier in the second round. Because he does have good size, and he shot over 40% on catch and shoot threes over the last couple of years. And Florida State's been a mess. So to his credit, it had nothing to do. That had nothing to do with him. I like him. If he ended up being a guy who stuck around the league for a while, and you look back and you go, he should have been a first rounder, that wouldn't shock me at all.
Okay. Nicholas Braxton in the chat. Sion James. What's your thoughts on Sion James?
Yeah, I guess if there's any player in this draft that has the chance to be like a Lou Dort type of player, it'd probably be him.
That's who he likens him to.
Yeah, he's a weird player because he looks like a football player, kind of like Lou Dort. Like, he looks like somebody who probably should be playing tight end instead of hoops, right? His jumper's a little weird. He's an okay shooter. He's not like lights out, knockdown. He's not going to get busy off the bounce, but he'll hit spot up shots. He can put the ball on the deck. He was a big part of why Duke had the season that they had, as a transfer from Tulane. So he's definitely interesting, but I don't think he's going to be there. From what I hear, he's not going to be around at pick 50. So if the Knicks were interested, they'd have to trade up earlier into the second round, to the top of the second round. From what I'm hearing.
Copy that. Okay, we have Sabatka in the chat says R.J. Lewis Jr. out of St. John's. Your thoughts?
Hey, look, man. As a longtime St. John's fan, he helped lead the Johnnies to, the best season of my lifetime. So shout out to him. I've never really been a huge fan of him as an NBA prospect. He really needs to become a consistent shooter. I think he should have went back to school, but maybe he's right. This is as high as his draft stock was ever going to get. I thought he struggled in the combine setting. It feels sometimes a little catch and hold, but the kid's an insane defender. He's a good mid-range shooter. So, maybe a couple of years in the G League, extending that range out, becoming more consistent, there definitely could be a role for him because he has all the role player stuff. And if the Knicks took him and he was back at the Garden, like place where he's comfortable, I couldn't hate it. A little overlap with McCullough. I don't know what the Knicks' plans are for McCullough, but another guy, good defender, right, who could put the ball on the deck, but really needs to be a more consistent shooter. So, if the Knicks didn't feel like they liked what they saw from Kevin and they wanted somebody similar, then I think that's a move that makes a lot of sense for them.
Okay, interesting. My guy John Talento in the chat is asking about John. Is it Tony Tonye Tonje?
Yeah. I'm not a big fan. I mean, he had a really big year as a scorer this year. Good shooter, but I don't think he leverages his scoring enough to make other guys better. And he's pretty old. I don't really see what he would bring to the Knicks unless we're talking about Westchester. So personally, he's not a guy I'm super high on, but a lot of smart people, have him earlier in the second round that I like to read or listen to or watch. So, I'm not the end all be all. Sure. So I definitely, I'm not going to say he's not going to be a good pro, but personally, I don't really see it.
Our guy TM, the chief moderating officer of the chat, asks about Isaac Nogues.
Yeah, insane defender. Really, really fun on that end, but the offense is just not there. Rip City Remix, G League kid. So, bit of a different path, than most of the prospects. But if you're just like looking for, let me get, just a dog defender in there who with raw offense, and we're going to throw him in the G League, let him develop. He's familiar with that process already. Maybe it just takes a little more time and that develops. But I think that his offense is a little too raw to be a guy who can maybe steal some minutes next year if the Knicks go with a coach who's willing to develop some young guys.
Got you on that. And we're going to talk about the coach in just a second. But it looks like, according to this guy's coach, Bruce Pearl, Dylan Cardwell is getting a workout with the Knicks. Any insight on Dylan Cardwell, 6'11" center out of Auburn?
Love him. I think internally we've had conversations in the No Ceilings group chats, like whether or not he was the more impactful big than Janai Broom, or at least the better pro prospect than Janai Broom on that Auburn team. Super bouncy, good shot blocker, can move his feet on the perimeter, good feel, can't shoot a lick. I think it was 34% from the free throw line this year.
Oh, God.
50%.
Oh, my
54%. I think it was 54% the year before. Like, cannot shoot a lick. But you're looking at a guy who I think is a third big in the NBA. Look, Jericho Sims has been a guy who's been able to stick in the NBA. Jericho, I think, is more athletic than Caldwell, but similar kind of player. And I like Dylan better. So, if Jericho Sims can stick around a little bit, I think that would be kind of a really fun pick for the Knicks there.
34%.
Yes.
Man, I got traumatized, man. My trauma just peaked up again.
I've seen you shoot free throws at the Garden at a higher clip.
Right. That's a fact. Oh, okay. Well, let's see, man. Hey, anything's possible. Things can certainly change. Okay, so we got a couple of prospects to think about here and consider. We'll see what happens there on Wednesday. Who's your favorite interview this year with the No Ceilings with the film reviews?
Favorite guy this year, it was probably Brea, just because I got to sit down and do that one in person. It's a little easier to catch somebody's vibe when you're sitting and doing it in person. But I had a really good conversation with John Poulikitis from Yale, who, I think if you were making an argument for who's a sleeper who, is going to be able to make an impact, he's one of my favorite sleepers. Lefty, 6'6", 6'11", 6'10" and a half wingspan. Ivy League Luke Kennard would be my comp for him.
Okay.
So just insane shooter, good size, good length, competitive. Made a name for himself last, not this past tournament, the year before when Yale beat Auburn. He had, I think, 28 in that game against Auburn, and then averaged almost 20 points per game this year. Career 40% 3-point shooter. Has played big, in big moments. Had a really good game against Purdue this year. So, he's played up to his competition. Got a Jason Tatum camp invite last summer, and we talked for 2 hours. It got to a point where we were like, man, you're just making my life hard. I'm going to have to edit this thing down, to make it digestible. And we went for almost 2 hours. He was just really intelligent kid. We broke down his film. We broke down pro film. Just sharp, obviously you expect that out of a kid from Yale, but just from a conversation standpoint, he was like, man, I'd sit here and talk to you guys for 5 hours if, if you need me to. So I liked having a conversation with him.
Is he expected to be drafted, or where do you think he goes?
It wouldn't shock me if he was drafted. He's definitely on the cusp. I think that he's one of these guys that a team would probably prefer to get on a priority 2-way undrafted free agent type situation. But, in the second round gets weird, there are guys who are I don't like this situation. Don't draft me. I'd rather go undrafted than be drafted. And then, that offers the opportunity for some guys to get drafted that maybe otherwise wouldn't. So we'll see. I'm hoping, I'm rooting for him that he does get drafted. But ultimately, if his agent thinks, hey, maybe we pass on that, we get ourselves to a better situation, a la and Austin Reeves, maybe they go that route. He's on the cusp, but I have him, closer to that front part of the second round personally. But if he gets drafted, it'd be more surprising than if he didn't get drafted, probably.
No, totally understand. Was there a rookie last year who, maybe you had high up on your list that was there and kind of had a maybe surprising season?
I will say a guy who I actually had exactly where he got drafted. I was a little iffy about Modest Buzelis.
For the Bulls.
And I thought he had a really good year. I like his competitiveness. He probably listened to one of my podcasts because he blocked me last year. When I guess I questioned his season. But I thought he had a really good season. So I was a little shocked, by that, with the way he shot the ball, how comfortable he looked. But, GM had said to us, he's just too arrogant to fail.
Oh, wow. Hey, all right.
So,
confident.
That was a little shocking. I don't know. Last year's class was weird, man. I thought Ron Holland was better than I thought he was going to be. I had him a little lower. I still, don't know if I would have taken him at 5, but I like his moxie.
His motor, I like that at Summer League when I saw him.
Yeah, he plays hard.
Yeah.
But Jared McCain, I think everybody slept on Jared McCain a little bit, right?
True.
Another
Summer League guy.
He was just a beast when he got the opportunity to be. And I remember talking to him at Hoop Summit, and out of every guy I've ever interviewed or just spoken to or whatever, he felt like the most engaged in the conversation. Just eye contact, just big smile. You could see the charisma. It was quarterback charisma, So everything you see on the TikTok with his personality, in person, he's really like that.
Same
and I
guy.
think that energy is infectious. People want to play with that. And then kid's an absolute, sniper, with the ball in his hands. So, I think he was probably the shock of the whole draft as far as just outperforming where, everybody expected him to be at this point.
For sure. Once again, we're talking to Corey Taluba of the No Ceilings podcast. Make sure you check them out at No Ceilings NBA. You know, Knicks could be going into this draft on Wednesday without a coach. Right now, they are talking to, you have Taylor Jenkins, you have Mike Brown. They may be talking to James Borrego. I mean, what do you think about some of the potential names that we're hearing here in terms of the Knicks coaching search?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure on the Knicks right now to get this thing right, because, as many faults as Tibbs has, and the way his relationships play out, or, it's as predictable as they come, right?
Yeah,
everybody knew when he was hired, this is probably how it was going to end. If it didn't end with a championship, it was going to end like this. When you talk about the best season the team's had in 25 years, right? And he's the coach, beats the Celtics. Got to get this right. I like Taylor Jenkins out of that list. I think I thought he did a good job in Memphis. If you're looking for a guy who's a little bit more adaptable, changed up his system this year, right? Ultimately, that maybe led to his demise.
True.
Doing that, but was willing to experiment a little bit. Spoke to a player this weekend who had played for him and said that, in his unbiased opinion, because he's not a fan of him as a coach, but he said, in his unbiased opinion, he's a really good coach. Intense, prepared, knows his stuff, but personally didn't mess with him.
Wasn't. Yeah.
And that's what's gonna happen. You want to look at player coaches because you want to go in opposite direction with Tibbs, or the Bulls tried that, didn't work necessarily. You got to find the right mix that just works with all the variables and the personalities that are there. Then you don't know how that's going to work until they get in the building. And ultimately the wins and the results are going to be what, moves everybody anyway. So, the locker room could love a guy. The wins don't come because he's not doing as good a job on the court. Then it is what it is. But, Mike Brown talked to another guy saying, I was at a barbecue with some guy and he was like, great coach, right? Love being around him. I don't know if he's right for New York. So, but these are guys, you got to be better than Tibbs. It's a high bar. The bar now is championship. It's championship or bust.
High bar. Yeah.
I think, as somebody who's watched Tibbs' career closely, I think I felt the same way after watching with the Bulls, like how many times you're going to do the same thing and watch it not work until you got to get it right. Because you could look at this moment and be like, man, we downgraded. Because Tibbs is an elite coach, as frustrating as he could be. The guy gets teams to overperform. And sometimes I think that Tibbs gives the impression that he's underachieving when really he got the team to overachieve, and it made the fans, the team, think that you're closer than you are. So now I think the Knicks are in a great position with how wide open the East is to kind of, even if maybe you don't get somebody on his level, I don't know if that, as long as they're good, the Knicks still have a shot to get to that finals spot. And I think that, there are a couple of options. Borrego's interesting too. He's in a tough spot.
True. But Charlotte, 100%, 1,000%.
He's in a tough spot. Granted, I don't know if it's a tougher spot than being in the New York spotlight with championship expectations.
True.
I don't know about that. So, personally, I would say Taylor Jenkins is probably the guy for the job. But, ultimately, it's going to be how far does Jalen Brunson take the Knicks, and can the Knicks fill out some of those depth pieces given their restraints in the offseason? Because the depth, you want to talk about not playing guys so much. You need guys who can play consistently and not, bleed points. And I don't know if the Knicks have that right now.
Yeah.
So
I don't, the fans will argue, how do you know if you have a bench if you don't play the guys? They need help. They need help, man. They need some upgrades on the bench, and we're dealing with vet minimum contracts, which means the crop.
And look,
this
is not a surprise when you trade for Cat.
Right.
When you make consolidation moves, you lose the depth. And so none of this is a shock. So
Shouldn't
there's
be.
there's going to be a lot of work to do on the front office's part, a lot of creativity. I know the Knicks cap guy is a beast.
Yeah.
So let's see. I think that at the end of the day, it's going to be roster over coach. We've seen coaches who can't get a job win NBA championships.
It's true.
Frank Vogel's unemployed, right?
Yeah. Budenholzer.
Budenholzer's unemployed. The coaching stuff, you need good ones, you need great ones, but the players got to take you over the finish line, and the Knicks need some more horses from the depth chart, which is why I think the rookies need maybe an opportunity to prove it. I think if Tibbs one mistake but not playing the rookies, I think Kolek probably should have got minutes throughout the year. I think he's the one guy that was ready, and everybody knows what campaign is. He's an innings eater in the regular season, and that's the best you're going to get for him.
Right.
There would have been some growing pains, but at least you had a mature guy who's a really creative passer. Maybe can do a little bit of what Brunson does in short spurts, right? And then hopefully by the time the playoff rolls around, he can give some breathers. I thought that was a mistake, but, Dadiet, I don't think he was ready. McCullough was rehabbing an injury.
Yeah, that was a scratcher, man, because, I don't know, man. I really hope this kid brings something to the table this coming season. I'm going to Vegas Summer League. I'm bringing my notebook and everything, man. I got to see Dadiet has to get busy because I look at, I'm just going down there. Like Terrence Shannon was getting busy with Minnesota. You had Ryan Dunn right there. Looking down the list here. All right, the rest of these guys didn't really do too much. Yeah, AJ Mitchell got busy with OKC a little bit. Jalen Wells.
Yeah.
Jalen Wells, starter for the Memphis Grizzlies. So I hope that whatever they see in Dadiet comes out soon, or else this was a missed opportunity.
Dadiet, I was not a huge fan. I like Dadiet. I thought he was a good prospect, but in no world, if you were like, is this a kid who can contribute in his first 2 years in the league? I'd be like, no.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't even the best prospect on his own team. When he was in Germany. So I think that unfortunately the Knicks need him to step up and get some minutes in, and it could get ugly, and you got to realize that you got to look at it from the long-term view, at least in the span of a season, that I think it might, if he's playing real minutes, meaningful minutes, it might be ugly early. Knicks might lose those minutes. Hopefully by the playoffs, things start to click because he has the physical tools, he's skilled, he's got a lot of potential. But like you said, sometimes it's just like Jalen Wells is going to be 6'7", shoots 40% from three, and plays defense. He gets on the floor. I'll ask you, what is Dadiet? What can he hang his hat on where he should get minutes?
Bro, going off of last season, honestly, not much, man. The shot was it's either on the money or it's a complete UFO. At times defensively looked to be a bit overmatched. The passing that he kind of showed at Germany, he's a young player, man. He's 18.
Of course. But what does he hang his Kolek can hang his hat on. He can come in, he can organize an offense, he can make plays. There's something you can expect from him, right?
In his sleep.
If you were to make the argument for McCullough, he's going to come in, he's going to be, a beast on defense. He's going to give all his energy there. He can make a smart pass. Hopefully he knocks down some shots from the outside. That's the thing. What are these guys hanging their hats on?
Right.
At this
and
point?
he wasn't really putting up that greater numbers in the G League either. So we'll have to see, man. But
I can't hate. That's a swing that a lot of people liked. And he did have some potential. Again, I was a little lower on him through the process. I know one of his development coaches, really liked him when he was with Ulm. So, he's got fans, but I just think he's one of these kids you got to take a longer term view on because it might not be this year either. It might be next year that it clicks. That's what happens with these young guys, these raw young guys, which is why I think the people I spoke to that work in the league, one of the conversations, how has NIL changed, the way that NBA teams are going to approach, what's the NBA going to do to change this, to adapt to it? The NBA teams are like, this is great. like we're going to get these guys to develop on somebody else's dime, and they're going to come in more ready, and we're probably not going to miss as much, because these guys are going to be a little bit more proven,
More
or
seasoned.
maybe they had a good, so NBA teams don't want to do anything. They want to just keep rocking with the system the way it is. Let them get paid in college. Let them be seen in multiple contexts, develop, and then come in and try to be a little bit more ready. But when you're talking about championships, man, it's hard for any of these rookies to get minutes. What rookies were playing in the finals? Without garbage time.
Yeah, I mean, AJ Mitchell was more regular season than he was.
That's what these guys are inning eaters in the regular season. They're not going to be playing in the playoffs. That's not a Tibbs thing. That's an NBA coach thing.
That's a win thing. we
got don't trust rookies. Coaches they're not going to trust rookies. Maybe you get a game, right? And I think it's a little different for big men.
Yeah.
Big men, just because it's hard to teach 7 feet, right? That's why you saw Khalil Ware, Zach Edey, even Quentin Post getting some minutes early in the playoffs. But even still, you'd rather not play a rookie big man who's anchoring a defense in those situations too. So it's hard, and expectations for these rookies, especially when you're in a situation the Knicks are in where the money's going to be tight for the bench pieces. You're like, man, we really need to hit on one of these kids. So the depth can, maybe sort itself out that way instead of having to get more creative. So I don't know. I'm pretty interested just seeing how that all plays out this offseason.
Right. Which is why, a guy like a Jenkins, could be the guy to come in here. And, hey, some people wanted to run him out of Memphis because he went too deep into the bench. They didn't know when to bring the starters back in. So we'll see what type of balance he can strike if he does get the job. Shout out to DJ Edsy over there in the UK, a £5 super chat. Says, Dadiet reminds me of when the Raptors selected Bruno Caboclo. Is that the name? Bruno
4 years away from being 4 years away? 2 years away from being 2 years away? I forgot the number.
I don't know, man. What are you guys doing for the draft? What's your draft plan over at No Ceilings?
Yeah, we're going to do a stream both nights, round 1 and round 2. So draft starts at 8. We'll be live 7:30 doing a little pre-draft show.
Yeah.
I think both nights probably do a rundown on the first round before night 2. But yeah, we'll be live on the No Ceilings YouTube channel all night, for the duration of the draft. I kind of like the, because I'm behind the scenes, producing the show too, even when I'm on. So I kind of like the 2 nights now because I'm not staying up.
Yeah, the 3-hour joints.
1 a.m., whatever. Whatever it ends up being. I makes my life easier. But we're going to be hanging the whole team, rotating panels all night for the draft. So that's at the No Ceilings NBA YouTube.
All right, man. We'll when we meet up in Vegas, man. If the Knicks do make a pick, let's recap on Vegas on the podcast. Maybe they'll get in some summer league action. We'll see what Dadiet and Kolick and the boys have in store, man. But great job all year, man. Keep killing it. Salute to the whole No Ceilings crew, man, and we'll catch up, bro.
Yes, sir, man. Always a pleasure to be on here. You know that. Since the COVID days, talking draft for months on end. A little different now. But man, congrats on 8 years. Seeing your growth has been super fun too. So, New York's killing it right now. A lot of great New York content creators out there that, even from afar, as a non-Knick fan, I keep tabs on everybody in New York just crushing right now.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. All right. That was our guy, Corey Taluba, in the building. Make sure you guys follow them at No Ceilings NBA, man. Salute to my guys over there at No Ceilings, man. Salute to everybody in the chat once again. Hit the like button, hit the share button, subscribe to the channel. How's everybody feeling, man? Is anybody tapping into the draft this year? I'll be tapping in because, as we said, this Knicks pick is important. They all are. If they make the pick, I think it's still going to be important, from a roster standpoint and the development of the second-year guys. Kolick in particular, Dadiet, Porty, though. That's my order of importance for next year is going to, because I still think they're going to go get a backup point guard. So I think my order of importance in terms of rotation piece: Dadiet, Kolick, Porty. What's your priorities in terms of the second-year players? McCullers, we'll see. He's got to long way to go as well. We'll see what McCullers, but really Dadiet, man. You know, that was that's a pick that the Knicks need to hit on. So, anyway, great show. Salute to everybody in the chat. Salute to all our mods. Salute to everybody who tapped in today. And make sure you guys go over to the NBA report, man. Me and Dexter Henry had a great show recapping Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Congratulations to the OKC Thunder. We talked about we reacted to the KD trade. We talked about all these injuries that's happening around the league, man. What's going on with all these Achilles injuries going on? So, yeah, salute, man, salute. So, yeah, make sure y'all stay hydrated. It's way too hot out right now. Yeah, it's crazy right now. We jumped straight into the heat wave out here in New York. Hey, I'm not complaining. Better than the winter time, but yeah, it's AC all day type of situation. And stay hydrated, as TM said. So to all our franchise channel members, respect Shaq, I see you. DJ Edsy, Talento, always in here. Who else? Nicholas Braxton, great questions today. TM, always a great job. Flo174, he says, damn, draft night is on Wednesday. Yep. And then free agency starts on Monday, I believe. Tuesday, next Tuesday. Free agency starts a week from Tuesday. We'll get all the free agency stuff going on. Who else we got in here? Christopher Blake. Salute. Above the rim. Got you. Yep, got you. Above the rim. Salute, man. Rare edition. I see you in here as well, man. Okay. All right. Everybody have a great show. Great day. I got to finish. Now it's off season. I got to catch up on my shows. I got to finish Dope Thief. I got to get to The Last of Us Season 2. After this, man, drop me some comments in the comment section. What shows do I need to be caught up on my streaming platforms? I already did. What's the joint with Zoe Saldana? I already did Lioness Fire. I did. What's the joint with Eddie Redmayne on Peacock? Day of the Jackal. Insane. What else did I do? I did a lot of good ones, man. I'm back on my Godfather Harlem. I fell off on that for a little bit. So, Forrest Whitaker and them, I got to catch up on that. What else? Oh, yeah, TM, we need an entertainment podcast. I think we're going to start that up in the off season, man. We'll catch up, see what shows everybody is dealing with, and we'll get to it. Yeah, who else we got? Damian Tucker, salute to you. Salute. The entertainment podcast. Okay. All right, yeah, we'll get it done, man. Anyway, have a great day. Have a great evening, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in. Salute to the replay gang. We out of here, man. Peace.